Yo, look at the wreckage you made. A second term of chaos and a world in flames. The numbers are out. The truth is cold. Listen! Approval ratings bleeding down to 35, and your great America who's actually alive. Gen Z turning away, 76%. No, you lost the rhythm, man, you lost the flow. Erratic in the White House, talking to the ghost, while the shadow of age burns the West Coast to the East Coast. Impulsive on the trigger, erratic in the mind, leaving the soul of the nation behind. Make America great, you just made us poor, dragging our brothers to a desert war. From the UA coins to the Iranian sand, you're building a kingdom on a shifting strand. Yeah, a kingdom of lies. Kingdom of lies, lies. 2 billion in crypto, world liberty greed, selling out the chips that the tyrants need. A modern teapot dome, UAE in the pocket, while the gas price shoots like a Persian rocket. No tax on tips, a lie, inflation, the truth. You're burning the pockets of the American youth, renovating ballrooms for a gold-plated ego, while the world watches the republic's soul go. Bomb 'em to the Stone Age, sounds like a crime, destroying the civilization, one bridge at a time. Homer's is a graveyard, the allies are gone, even the Pope knows you're leading us on. Hiding in the riot is a January crew, the only thing first is what's profitable for you. Ice at the door, catching citizens by mistake, terrorizing streets for a headline's sake. Project 2025, tearing schools to the ground. Where is the freedom that we thought we found? Enemy of the people, look at the screen. The most repressive leader that we ever seen. Epstein files, hidden secrets in the dark. A predator of justice, leaving a scar. 61% say you're losing your mind. The forever war is the only thing you find. Net negative 20. The facts don't lie. Game over.
I feel a need for a disclaimer.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, welcome to the Shit Show. My name's Andrew Edwards.
I'm Richard Basalato. Since there's only three of us, I'm actually in the middle for some strange, odd reason.
And my name is Joe Augustin. Good afternoon and welcome to the Shit Show. The disclaimer will come up in just a moment. For now, the intro to the show. It's the only show that tries to cover the situation where every crisis has now stopped being its own headline and has started dating the other headlines. The Strait of Hormuz is a mess. Indonesia briefly tries to put a cover charge on the Strait of Malacca. America is apparently getting low on missiles, and the global economy is now being held together by exhausted politicians and their one loyal bartender. Even the side effects have side effects. Oil is up, food is up, and it's a sure sign that the Iran conflict has officially entered the most terrifying phase of all. The price of condoms are going up. And while all this is happening, war is being turned into memes like the one you just saw. Climate change is slow roasting entire cities. And a humanoid robot has just beat the human half marathon record because apparently even our last source of dignity, unnecessarily self-inflicted physical suffering, has now been automated. Meanwhile, it feels like every system is fraying at the same time. Trade, weather, democracy, truth. That's because it is. Welcome to the final season of We Can't Have Nice Things, also known as the Shit Show. Now, to help us with dealing with our shit show today, we have an expert who is a highly experienced executive and team coach who integrates a clinical psychology experience with her work as a coach. She believes that a deep understanding of psychology is key to meaningful behavioral change, finding purpose, and creating lasting impact. Originally from the UK, Jane began her career as a clinical psychologist before relocating to Asia. And today she serves as a trainer, coaching supervisor, and mentor coach for 3 globally accredited coaching schools through her company, Pebble Psychology. We're pleased to welcome to the fray Dr. Jane Tumola.
Thank you very much, Joe and all. Very excited to be with you.
I'm a bit anxious to find out, did I pronounce your name correctly or have I done it wrong like I'm sure many people have?
It's interesting because I'm British, but my husband is Finnish. So in Finland, they stress the second syllable. So it's Tuomola, and I don't even say it right all the time. So no worries.
Okay.
So,
Well, welcome to the show.
Joe, before we move on with Jane, and it's great to have you here, Jane. What about explaining the intro video first before we move on? Because I think that's important.
The disclaimer. What you saw as the intro, basically, one of many videos being produced. We don't know exactly by who, but we know whose side they're on. And it's Iranian propaganda, basically, using Lego. And I've got to say, a lot of it's on point. I mean, it's obviously biased, but a lot of it is really on point. And that's actually, it's for me, when you do media properly and you do humor and stuff like that, if it rings true, that's when you've actually got yourself a really good piece of work there. So, just objectively, I approve. I mean, it's funny. It would work well on the Today Show or the Daily Show.
So I think we're going to try and pick a video a week that sort of Joe's responsibility now moving forward is to pick a video a week that we'll use in the introduction, because it's part of the information zone now. And I think that there's some interviews with the guys, they're still anonymous, but it is part of the information cycle. So that's what the shit show is all about, news and information. So I think we'll use one every week as a feature to kick off the show. So if you haven't seen them before, keep an eye out. They're pretty funny. And I agree that they're completely on point. The one about Kash Patel, drunk. Have you seen that one yet?
Not yet, but I mean, the stuff I'm hearing about that particular adventure, it's amazing as well. We'll get into it today on today's show.
Yeah.
But let's get to Jane. Jane, first of all, let's talk a little bit about you, or let's have you talk a little bit about you. Tell us a bit more about your background.
Yeah, well, I started life as a clinical psychologist back in the UK and was very happily working in the National Health Service with clients with severe and enduring mental illness. So I sort of specialised in working with clients with psychosis. And then my husband and I went, right, well, we want an adventure. Where could we go before we have children, do something interesting? And so we came to Singapore, which is where I am now. We did the usual, let's come for 2 years. And we stayed for 8 years the first time, had 2 children, loved it here. Moved back to my husband's country of Finland for a few years, and then we've been back for the last 5 years. And actually, it was the move to Singapore that really sort of changed my career trajectory, because when I started in private practice here, I was working with a lot of expats who didn't have mental health problems, or certainly shouldn't have had mental health problems if they'd had the right support through their transition to Singapore. And I was suddenly like, oh, they don't want to do a whole history, and let's go into the background. And so I came across solution-focused therapy and then solution-focused coaching, which felt like a much better fit to really support people to thrive through transitions. You don't necessarily need to be struggling or have a mental health issue to want things to be better. So that's how I started integrating coaching and psychology. And then I guess as I've moved through my career, one of my big passions is supporting other therapists and coaches, which I do through coaching supervision, mental coaching and training. So I feel very lucky. I'm very privileged to do a lot of different things, all of which I love a lot.
Now you've invested a lot of time and effort into getting your qualifications. You're a doctor in psychology. I'm just wondering, as someone who builds your credentials in a particular area, it sounds like you've kind of had to move to where the belief center is, or what is the well-held truth, right? I'm just assuming, because the doctorate was some time ago, and you say you discovered new things along the way. How does it feel to move where your center of belief is?
I think that's a really interesting question, because I guess partly that's through professional training, partly that's through life experiences, partly through it's shifting to work in a different country. It's I think it's been a really interesting journey of where I thought I would be at this. If you'd asked me 20 years ago in the NHS where I would be, I wouldn't be sitting in Singapore being a team coach and sort of training on resilience and mental wellness, although they all sort of fit together. I think it's been a one of those things just seem to, the path takes you where it will and you adapt with it. And so I think it's a really interesting journey, but not one that I expected.
I understand your daughter approves of the name of the show.
Yeah, my daughter, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son, and my daughter, she goes, I don't want to be a psychologist, but she does love listening to podcasts. So when I was telling her I was a guest on a podcast, she goes, which one? And I was like, oh, it's called The Shit Show. And she's like, oh, that's cool. So I'm taking the coolness while I can get it before the teenage years kick in. But yes, she was very excited that I was on this.
So I heard that as you're coming on, or as you were coming on to the show, you had your own kind of shit show happening as well. Want to share a bit about that?
Yeah, well, thanks to your podcast, I now have a name for my year so far, which feels a bit like a personal shit show. Excuse the language. Yeah, no, so one of those. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I speak on resilience, and obviously over time, I think the byproduct of being as a psychologist is I get inspired by my clients and learn along the way and feel like, I'm pretty good at self-care. I'm good at my exercise, eating healthily, looking, seeing friends, etc. And sometimes, however good you are at that, things come along. And this year has just been one life event after another. So came back from Christmas holidays after a time in our Finnish summer cottage, feeling very peaceful. And then 2 days later, my daughter had what could have been a really serious accident from being thrown off her horse. So we turned up at the hospital, and it's one of those, you bypass triage, 10 doctors descend on you, and you're like, oh my goodness, this could be awful. Thankfully, it wasn't. She's okay, thankfully, but that was the start. And then we've had one of my husband's relatives has had cancer come back for the third time. One of his relatives died. One of my close family friends who I've known since I was a baby died. I can't even, I'll help her. So I'm lucky enough to be very spoiled in Singapore and have domestic live-in help to support me while I run my business. And our helper's had a very serious medical issue and had to go back to the Philippines. So while I've been having a sort of emotional onslaught of difficult events, I've had a lot less practical support through that while we've had teenage hormones in the house. And the culmination of it all was, first of all, the washing machine broke down just before the Hari Raya long weekend, and I was already behind with all the household tasks, and I was just like, you've got to be joking, because it takes another 4 or 5 days for the service person to come and fix it when it's a public holiday. And then to top it all off, our toilet got blocked. So I discovered this in the morning, phoned the plumber, had him coming in the afternoon, and then forgot that the plumber was coming, used the toilet, and was literally up to my elbows in shit. And I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. You have to laugh, because otherwise I would have cried. It was just one thing after another. So it's feels like it's calming down now, but certainly alongside all these world events, we've had a lot going on in our family this year.
Yeah, I'm sure moments like that, it's where the phrase "Doctor, heal thyself" come to mind.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at the things that you've been talking about, and I hear you talk about this idea of be curious, not furious, right? I think in terms of relationships and all that. But I think when it comes to things happening to you which are not to do with other people, like all the stuff that happened to you, is that something that's going to be that you find that's kind of a useful way to look at that as well? To try to be curious about.
Yeah, I guess what was interesting going through all of this was kind of none of it was about me or influenced by, I didn't have any control over any of what was happening, but obviously a lot of it was happening to people I care about, which had a big impact. And I think it's about trying to remember, because it's very easy when you're, I felt very stretched. That's a word that I've used to a lot of people this year. How are you? I'm very stretched. There's not enough of me to go around everything that's needed in my life, and it's very easy to become kind of grumpy and short-tempered and tearful, and perimenopause thrown in there for good measure. And I think that is something that I've tried to hang on to, because that's what I teach other people, that rather than just getting annoyed at my children for not helping with the chores, or something, trying to think, how's everybody else in this? How's everybody else doing? How can I be interested in people's good reasons for not doing something or for acting in a way that that I struggled with. So, but I'm, as my children will tell you, I'm not always good at that. So I try my best to apply what I do to others to myself, and it works. I think it definitely helps. Yeah.
Yeah, to talk a bit about that in terms of like relationships and office politics and what have you. Just the principle of it, so we get a good sense of it as well. About being curious.
Yeah, I think. I mean, well, I work for myself now, so I'm not. I mean, I'm part of a number of teams, and I think it's about thinking most people in the world. Some of the people in your Lego videos aside, maybe, I very much believe people are doing their best. People come to work wanting to do a good job, wanting to be effective, wanting to make a difference in the world, and that's how we show up. But often we may have not had a good role models, or we may be having our own personal life events that are impacting how we show up. And so I think for me, when I'm working with teams, or whether I'm part of a team, it's about thinking, well, what's the bigger picture here? What are we all trying to do? Where are we trying to get to? And how do we do that together rather than being against each other and sort of taking stress out on each other? How do we work together more effectively? And I think that be curious, not furious is one of the things that really helps me think, well, even with my kids, just asking rather than like, why haven't you done this? What's your plan to do this? What's your plan to get your homework done? What's your plan to get, what have you thought about in terms of reaching this project deadline or that project deadline? So it's really trying to involve people and collaborate and work together and see us, well, we're all on the same side here. How do we sort of work together more effectively? And I think one of the things that really helps me is that pause, rather than, because it's very easy to be triggered by somebody hasn't done something that's annoyed me. Okay, but I'm also extra annoyed because of what's happening to me. How do I just pause? How do I just take a breath, stop for a minute, really think, okay, let me put my stuff aside, let me focus on this person and what we can do effectively to move forwards.
So I think one of the questions that obviously would come up for people is as you're doing all that and looking out for what's happening, internally and with yourself and what's happening, right? The world around is swirling. I mean, there's the stuff like in your world, the health issues, the toilet, everything's happening. How does it impact? I mean, I think it's you handling the outside world, but how does it then impact the way you interact with the world outside of it? I mean, how can you use that as a kind of a way to empower yourself to come out of it and be a source of either personal resilience or resilience to your family and friends and community?
Well, I think I've done this for long enough. I feel like a lot of it is about kind of having systems and process and things in places that support you as well as possible. So when the shit show happens, whether that's my personal one and the world and everything together, there's some capacity to manage things, because I think it's all about how do I be at my best. Lots of the clients come and see me and kind of their goal is something along the lines of, right, I want the world to be more sunny, and it's like, well, that would be great, but it isn't. So how do we prepare ourselves for the rain and what our umbrella and our waterproofs, etc. But sometimes the deluge is so much, an umbrella is not going to cut it in Singapore's tropical thunderstorm. So how do we step out of it? And sometimes it's about how do we take a break? How do we step back from that so that we can keep showing up? And I think that's one of the things that's really sort of tested me this year. I think lots of us in the helping profession are really good at helping other people. We're not always very good at helping ourselves. So how can I focus on myself, ask for help? I mean, that's something I really had to do this year, was really, if friends said, oh my God, that sounds awful, what can I do? Then I'd go, actually, what you can do is, cook some meals for me, or, actually ask for help and, sort of draw on, this isn't me alone. It's about how do we draw on the community that we're in? Because I think that's a really big part of how we all, build resilience and show that we're not doing it alone. We're doing it in conjunction with other people. So how do we draw on that community? I'm really sorry, I've lost your question. I might have gone a little bit off tangent there. What do you want me to just share again if I didn't answer?
No, that's okay. We'll just move along to the next thing. I was just going to think about how, in terms of building capacity, right? I mean, you're talking about building capacity for resilience. I think of ourselves in Singapore as being quite spoilt. I mean, in terms of, I remember a story now. I can't remember the full details of it, but essentially it was where there was a community and everybody was exposed to the same issues. but there was this person who was of lower economic means, who was doing everything she could to try and help someone who was previously much more well off. And when the child pressed them on this and said, why are you doing this? Why are you giving them all the help? The response was, they're not used to being poor. So I was thinking about, in the context of this, are we in Singapore and in places that are quite well off, I guess, are we just not built for resilience?
That's a really good question. I think whatever context you're in, you can certainly build it and grow it. But you're right. This year, for example, having got used to having a domestic helper, I ran a household effectively for years by myself with no help, and yet then I had somebody who was excellent, and now I haven't. I'm like, I've got to almost relearn the skills and put new systems in place. So you're right. Sometimes I guess things don't get tested because normally we're quite well supported, and I think we're quite insulated here, having a government who is very good at planning for the future and managing, and the infrastructures here is great, and we have MRT. So yes, if there's fuel shortages, we're less exposed to some of that. So I think you're right, we are very lucky. And so sometimes it's how do we it's very easy to get comfortable, I guess, and it's like I think it can be really helpful to think, how do I keep growing and pushing myself, not just to cope in a crisis, but just to sort of learn and grow ourselves, because I think there's so much benefit that comes from that. But you're right, sometimes we have to actively seek that out more when the environment is more comfortable.
What I've been hearing a lot of these days, everybody's protecting themselves from anxiety, right? Everybody's feeling anxious and trying to keep things away. And I'm wondering if we're developing an unhealthy relationship with anxiety, in the sense there's such an avoidance of it that sometimes people just completely try and build their life around it, and so they become avoidant, and they actually try to it becomes, in a sense, very Pollyanna-ish, if that's the word for it. Is there a positive side to anxiety?
Absolutely. I think it's all about thinking what's useful. Well, first of all, I guess there's a difference between fear and anxiety. So fear is like, in the moment, there's an immediate threat. Our body is very well designed to sort of kick off the fight or flight response, so we can respond to that threat and run away or fight. And I think anxiety is more of that future focus. What if, what if something happens? What if something happens? And I think it can go two ways. So either people get over-focused on the anxiety and worry about every possible catastrophe, and that becomes all-encompassing and, gets in the way, or we just avoid it. And, that's often why everybody's sort of, binge watching Netflix and switching off and on their phone all the time and playing games and just avoiding any feelings, because it's too overwhelming to be with. So we cut off from it. And I think it's about how do we find that middle ground? Because some anxiety is really useful, because if we're worried about a future threat, well, actually anxiety can help us prepare for that. So if we try and look at what are the what ifs, what am I, worried about? What of those what ifs can I actually do something about? So say I'm worried about, well, actually, food prices are going to go up and fuel prices are going to go up. How can I manage that? What can I do now to maybe budget? What can I save on money now so that if and when that happens, I'm prepared? So that can be really useful to think, what's the anxiety about? What can I do to help prepare for whatever it is? Because I guess the antidote to anxiety is action. It's not avoidance. It's about, what can I do? And so I think it's about, often that's a question I ask to clients, because often clients come in and go, well, I want to get rid of my anxiety. Well, of course, none of us want to feel anxious, but it's useful. It's there as a survival strategy. So if we get rid of it, that's not helpful, because then when we need it, it's not there. So I often ask people, how much of this is useful? How much of this is actually taking you forwards, or could take you forwards if you listen to it? And some of it's about just gradually, because if we've always learned to switch off because it's unpleasant, it's about how do we gradually expose ourselves to just sitting with some of it, and just go sitting with it and go, what is it about? What is it I'm worried about? Because the more we know about it, the more we can do something, rather than it being, oh my God, it's so scary to even sit with, I don't want to go there. So it's about how do we sort of build that up gradually, that ability to sit with the anxiety and see what's useful in it, and then do something based on that.
So it's a bit like the I think it's adjacent to freeze or fright or flight, right? I mean that sort of arrangement, because I think I think we talk about it, assuming sometimes that people are just able to get on with it and build a resilience and do something more about it. But I do find there are a lot of people who also just stay frozen, right? We have people who lose their jobs and are stuck in a certain mindset or frame, so that they can't move on and just do something else. Like in Singapore, many locals have the option, if they want to immediately sort of pivot, they can go straight to driving a taxi, or one of those things as for an economic pivot. But many of them don't. They just stay stuck, right? So
Joe, can I just quickly
Yeah,
ask
sure,
before you move on? Because I thought that was really interesting what you said about the difference between fear and anxiety, whereas fear is present focused, whereas anxiety is future focused. But one of the ways I hear anxiety being spoken about in society more broadly is not as a future focus, but more as a thing that I'm suffering right now, and therefore I have to go and get medication for it and all that sort of stuff. Can you just sort of clarify that bit, because I think that's a really important point you just made.
Yeah, well, I think the anxiety, I mean, the experience is happening now because I'm worried about the future. So it's not that there's an immediate threat that I have to do something about, or my body has to do something about now. But I'm and the physiological experience is identical in terms of how it feels. So I'm feeling it now, but it's about a future event.
Okay, yeah, that's a distinction I haven't heard before. Go, Joe.
No, actually, I had a different thought about anxiety as well. I mean, is there a contagion effect? As in, like, I think we used to have more happy-go-lucky people amongst us, and I think they've almost been sort of like reminded by everybody else, like, oh, you can't be as happy-go-lucky.
I think absolutely, and there's emotional contagion both with positive and negative emotions. If you surround yourself by lots of people who worry and talking about worries, oh my God, why am I not worried? I should be worried, and then start worrying. Or if you have a lot of people who are very hopeful and optimistic, and it's like, well, that could rub off too. So I think, yeah, really important to think, how am I sharing, what am I rubbing off on other people, or who do I want to surround myself with, especially in times of crisis where there's so much going on, what's useful again, because I think, shows like this are really useful in terms of for people to have a place to take, not just be worrying alone, but let me, actually have some intelligent conversation about what's happening, find out what's happening, get ideas from different people. And then at other times you might be like, that's the last thing I want to do is talk or hear hear anything about the difficulties. I want to have some fun and surround myself with people who can do that. So I think, again, it's all about moderation. We need both. But yeah, I think there's a lot going wrong in the world right now. So there's a lot of people struggling. So we all pick up on that.
Is there kind of a thing where, I mean, so I'm actually being quite mindful about not stepping into psychiatry as well here, but in terms of there are people in the world who are who genuinely are in the moment anxious, and then there are people who are also very, I think they get their strokes from causing anxiety, from being able to push and create that. I mean, without mentioning any names. What do you think that how does that play out in terms of society, or from a psychology perspective, right? I know some cultures have got this thing where, if someone's causing too much trouble, too much drama, and that sense, they take them out to the back of the woods and they take care of them. I mean, literally. Is there something now? Is the world right now tolerating too much?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess my psychology really focuses more on individuals than societies, because I guess, organizational psychology, and it would look at that bigger picture. But, I think as things ramp up, the norm changes. So it's like, well, actually, if there's a lot of conversation about this, then we all get used to here, and then it goes up, and then it goes up. And so we do end up tolerating more. And again, some of that can be really positive, that we've got that resilience to sort of tolerate more difficult things and still survive and thrive. And some of it's like that, the norms change, and then we kind of you take a step back and go, what the hell are we tolerating? How did we get to this point? It's like that, the frog in boiling water, it doesn't feel that process until it's too late. So I think you're right, things sort of, we definitely tolerate more, which isn't always a good thing.
So how do we organize? And I would be careful how I say this as well. How does one organize a benevolent coup?
I'm sure I'm the right person to be asking.
Yeah.
That would be
We'll
good.
talk about it later. Certainly needs one.
Well, I was looking at some of the other work that you've been talking about as well, right? About how there is a lot of it just deeply rooted in curiosity. So I want to just talk a little bit more about this right now, because I think when the climate or when everything around you is a little warm and you're taxed, I think it leaks into organizations. I think that's what's happening. And I just hosted the opening of the Singapore Maritime Week, and it's the maritime industry goes back a long way. It's a significant part of Singapore's economy as well. And we had the Deputy Prime Minister speaking quite. He delivered a lecture, and then there was a fireside chat. And he and another ex-cabinet minister the week previously as well had said more or less the same thing, as in, like, they wake up, despite where they are, what they're doing in their life right now, they still wake up as well, and they check out their WhatsApp messages, and they get the stress dose of the morning as well. They get the cortisol boost, right? If people even at that level, I guess in a certain sense get the system shock of, like, oh, this is news, this is unexpected. How can leaders, how can parents, how can partners in life, I guess, help other people prepare for that kind of thing? I mean, it's that's I should put a question mark right there. So how do you help other people, regardless of your role? How do you help other people deal with that kind of high level stress?
I think there's not really sort of one answer to that, because I think a lot of it's about, what do we each individually do to cope with stress and put ourselves in a good place to manage that. So, for example, one of my colleagues asked me years ago, do you prioritize your schedule, or do you schedule your priorities? And I thought, oh, that's a really good question, because I'm really good at, responding to clients and keeping them. And I was like, but at the end of the day, it's very easy to then miss my gym session, for example.
Yeah.
So one of the things over time is I've got, well, actually, what do I really need? It's going back to sort of our, what are our basic needs in terms of eating well, sleeping well, exercise, etc. So, some of it's about modeling that. So in terms of working with leaders, like, what are you modeling for other people? What are you modeling as a parent? How can we all sort of start from within? Because that will, if you're feeling well rested and well nourished, then your body's in a completely different space to respond to stress when it happens. So it's about, well, how do I do that? Lead by example, and how do I encourage that? So, it might be in our family, we talk about how do, what does healthy eating look like? Or let's all go for a walk together at the weekend. And, how do we do that? And again, same with teams, how do we sort of have good, hygiene in place in terms of, if we have a meeting that we start and finish on time, or, what's the end of the workday, and do we email each other sort of, at midnight, and how are we doing that? So it's sort of thinking, how do I operate on a daily basis in a way that is helpful to manage stress, so that as more and more comes in, I've got that capacity to respond to that. So I think a lot of it's leading by example, and then think, right, what do we need to do in the moment? Okay, so we've done our best to get ourselves be in a good place as we can be, and then a crisis comes in, right? How do we need to reorganize in the crisis, and what do we do at that point, which might be different? So I guess there's the difference between the longer term, what we do regularly, and then what do we do in the moment to cope. But I think a lot of the leaders that I work with, it's about, get yourself in a good place and role model that. What is it I want to be showing my team? If I want my team to show up in a certain way, then I need to do that as well.
Are you seeing signs of fragmentation nowadays? Because one of the things I noticed has been happening a lot of is this focus on coming down to I, me, myself. I'm going to try and work on me, right? And yet there's this other part of it which people always talk about, is like teamwork, the group culture, and I'm wondering if this is a kind of the question I had is more about the focus on self right now. If you go on Instagram and TikTok and what have you, a lot of the solutions are about what you can do for yourself, how you can sort things out for yourself. is there a fragmentation happening where we go like, you know what, I'm more the party of one? Is that something that you're noticing at all?
I'm not sure I'm noticing that globally either. Well, sort of either way, but I think that, you know, we need to start with ourselves, but we can't end with ourselves. You know, we live in a society, we function in groups, we have to sort of connect and support each other. So I think it's very different, and that's often where the difference between an organization that's thriving versus not is. It's like where actually people are working together as opposed to focusing individually. And I think the danger is when there's a high amount of stress. I've worked with teams, for example, where you go in and when I do team coaching, for example, I'll have a conversation with everybody individually prior to the team session to sort of get the lay of the land. How are you? How's the team? What's going well? What are the challenges? So I can sort of prepare for that process, how to make the best use when we're all together. And some of the teams I've worked with, everybody individually is feeling stressed and burnt out, and they're so caring of their team members that they don't want to share this and they don't want to ask for help or delegate because they're so worried about impacting other people negatively. Well, I can't ask anybody else to because I know they're burnt out as well. And that, actually that causes more suffering, because then we're not working together to think, well, actually, what could we all do differently? So that's one of the things that I often work with teams on, is thinking, how are you functioning individually? You know, what's your individual contribution and how are you working together as a team? Where's your team resilience? In terms of, you know, what can we do differently? So one team I worked with, for example, realized that actually their client work that was in the healthcare service, their client work was really important, and yet the organization, different parts of the organization were throwing other projects on top of them. And everybody was saying yes because nobody felt they could say no. But it was only when they got together and thought, well, actually, what's the impact of this? We need to do something differently. We need to protect what's coming in. So I can't say that I would be able to comment as a whole, but I think it certainly makes a difference if you connect as a team or work as a team and really draw on each other's strengths, then you're going to actually function much better as a team and as individuals, so that, you know, both support each other.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if leaders actually have, you know, if we have enough people actually in society who can handle a large leadership problem, because I think people tend to spend too much time on trying to be nice and trying to get things to move along, and it might not always work that way. I mean, I think real leadership is going to place you in a situation where you're going to be in uncomfortable situations. You're not going to be nice to everyone at the same time. The recent analogy I heard is that, you know, like good governance, it's like learning to fry small fish. you have to do it just right so that it's crispy and edible and not overdone and burnt or underdone and inedible. So is it, to be someone in management, to look after other people, to be an effective parent, does it require a little bit of I want to say a Machiavellian edge almost to be a good parent or leader?
I'm not sure that's quite the right phrasing, but I think you do need to be able to, you know, take tough decisions and make, you know, you can be very caring and at the same time, you know, confront people and go, well, this is how it needs to be done, or this is what you need to do. And I think that's the real skill where people fall down, is that either they try and be too nice, or, you know, don't address the elephant in the room, or don't take those tough decisions on you know, for the greater good of the team or the organization or the family, because they want to be liked, versus actually, you know, then going the other way and going, well, actually, you know, being completely obnoxious and my way or the highway. You know, I think you can have both. I think you have to sort of, you know, sit in that discomfort. I'm not going to be liked all the time. You know, being a good parent is not about being a friend to your child. It's about, you know, sometimes it is about being very kind and caring and empathic, and sometimes it's setting the boundaries. You know, you have to do that, and that's not easy. I can teach people about it. Doesn't mean I always find it easy with my children who are screaming, you're, you know, this, that, or the other, or you're being unfair. And the same in the work context. I think it's about how do we manage both. There's a wonderful book called Radical Candor, which is about how do you challenge with care, so you can be highly challenging and highly caring at the same time. You don't have to sort of choose one or the other.
Yeah. How do you set up that context so you can have that candor? I think a lot of it has to do with framing, right?
Yeah, and all of it's about, building a relationship over time. It's not one conversation in the moment. It's about, how do you create that psychological safety? How do you be somebody who is open to feedback, is open to discussion, is open to collaboration, but at the same time, people know, when the shit hits the fan, you're going to be the person that will make that call. So I think a lot of it's practice. A lot of it's about, doing it in small ways, and then it gets easier and easier, and the more you do it. And I think it's that part of that sort of being curious idea of, well, this needs to be done, right? This person might need to do it, but also trying to collaborate with them. Sometimes it's about, well, other people will have great ideas if I just ask them. So how do we have different kinds of conversations that can, involve everybody and be really, well, what do I value in this person? What can I see as the good in them to sort of frame the discussion as I go in? Because then I go in with a different mindset if I've connected with their strengths, and what's the end goal, where do we need to get to, and how much room is there room to negotiate, or do I just need to go, right, this needs to happen. So it's about how do we go in with the right approach, seeing this person in their best with their strengths, and be curious, how do we get there together?
I was wondering about
Sorry, can I
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give you a break from the big screen sometimes, Jane. So you're talking about lots of different pockets of things, and I thought it might be because the question we're asking is, can you build resilience? And a lot of what you're saying, like when you think in a business context, could be translated to a community context, including families, right? So when it comes to building resilience, some of the things that I've heard you talking about are obviously trust, which is at the foundation of everything, right? But do you want to? I don't know if you've got a checklist, but do you want to just go through, what are those necessities for building resilience in yourself?
Well, I think some of it is because I think people often tend to go, either I'm resilient or I'm not. Seeing it as like a binary construct, which it isn't. It's a skill that can be learned and built over time, just like anything else. And I think where I start with people is sort of, first of all, activating resilience. So the idea of, it's not the best metaphor for Singapore, but the idea of kind of a tree, going through different seasons. That a tree in winter, it doesn't, it's in the environment isn't good around it. There's no leaves there, and yet it's got a very strong trunk and very strong roots. And often we forget about those. So I think my starting point is always, well, what's there already that you're not aware of? So it might be looking at, what keeps you healthy, what brings you joy, what fun do you have, what works. Some of it's about looking at, well, we've all been through difficult times in our life. What's helped you through previous difficult times in your life that you could, draw on now? And, I've said already a bit about the health and the sleep, and the diet, because sometimes people come for therapy and I'm like, well, if we haven't taken care of the physiological side, then actually the cognitive side isn't going to have as huge, bigger difference as it could do. Let's, work really holistically. So I think that's where I always start. And I think it's thinking, it often might be things like, what are your values? What's important to you? Are you living in line with your values? That's often questions that I ask people. What helps you feel effective? What's your sort of purpose in life? Because all of those things, the more we sort of live in line with that, the more sort of, the happier we are and the more satisfied we feel, which also sort of feeds into that resilience piece. So I think it's starting with, well, what's there already? What can we then add to that? So I often ask people like scaling questions of 10 out of 10 is the most resilient you could, all the resilience you have to get through whatever the personal or, larger scale challenges are, and where are you, and what's the next little step? So what does the next little step look like? Well, actually, maybe I would be, pausing, if I get triggered by something and it makes me annoyed, I'm just going to, stop and breathe before I respond. So, we look at tiny steps, and how do you sort of practice each of those to build? So that the steps are going to be very different depending on your starting place, but a lot of it's sort of tying that all together to, and some of it's about having a sort of growth mindset. Carol Drek has done a lot of work on this, that people tend, it's not just your intellectual ability that helps you achieve, it's your resilience. So if you, it's about effort and hard work and, continuing even when things are difficult is actually going to take you further. So some of that is about the mindset, with my kids, if they're sort of like, oh, I can't do this, I hear that as I can't do it yet. okay, oh, you haven't figured out how to do that yet. What needs to happen to support you to be able to do that? So it's all about, putting in the effort and the hard work and learning skills over time. I should come up with a checklist though, because that might organize my answer in a better way. But
no, it's cool. So when my boys were probably about your kids' age, I wrote a blog called "The Only C Word That's Not Allowed in Our House," and it's "can't," because it's one of those words that really frustrated me with the kids. I can't, but like, when I look at sort of the foundation of resilience, so there's a lot of talk about Gen X being very resilient because we're the last generation. That we've got 3 Gen Xers here. I'm presuming you're an older millennial. Am I right, Jane?
I just fit into Gen X.
All right, so okay. So we were the last generation, latchkey kids, blah blah blah. But the reality is, we basically solved our own problems and dealt with our own issues, right? Whereas when I speak to younger generations, I'm very concerned with the language I hear. A lot of use of the word trauma, a lot of the use of words like psychopath, narcissist, and so broadly, used when there's only 1, 2, 3% of the world's population that is definitely sort of targeted that way. But my concern is that younger generation who have grown up in the greatest times humanity has ever seen, if you are lucky enough to come from a wealthy country. And now we're going into hard times, and this generation have never seen it. And I'm concerned about their ability to cope, just because the tools that they've had in life. I mean, I think the poorer kids will probably cope better than the wealthier kids, because when you've already got hard stuff in your life, you're better at dealing with hard stuff. But I don't know, what do you think, like from a generational perspective, from what you've seen, older people sort of more capable of, because we've also got memories that, especially boomers, that actually go back to the serious times. What do you sort of think intergenerationally?
Yeah, that's really interesting how it's different over time. Because I guess part of that building resilience is going through things that are difficult and building the skills over time. And if you've never had chance to do that, then it's going to be a bit of a baptism by fire when we get there. So yeah, and I think it's also interesting. I'm partly, I guess, because I'm a psychologist, very focused on my children and how I support them to build that resilience over time. But that's a very conscious process that takes a long time. And I think, things often swing. So, because, I'm all for, mental health advocacy and information and people sort of talking about things and openly sharing. And it's almost swung the other way, that everybody's experienced trauma and everybody's a bit ADHD, which is, hugely disempowering to those who actually have a diagnosis. And so I think it's sort of, we've gone from, nobody talking about these things, everybody talks about them. And then, there'll be hopefully some more balance along the way. But yeah, it is a conscious process that we have to go through. And if you don't have to go through, there's this argument, well, why would we need to bother until we have to? But then it might be too late. So I think, again, I think that's the value of community, of, sharing that wisdom down and, not losing the stories of people who've been through things, and how do we sort of learn from each other. And I think that's some of what's sad about happening in the world now. It's like, well, we've seen it happen before. We know why it happens. We can track it in real time now, and yet it's not changing. And I think it's, how do we stay hopeful in that and just draw on everybody's experience to help all of us?
Yeah, I mean, you see the young men moving towards the right wing, right? And it's like, yeah, you guys are going to be at the front row of those machine guns, so be careful what you're fighting for, right? Sorry, Joe, back to you.
I was thinking about the leader or the parent who realizes there's a real problem with resilience in the family or in the company, and they go like, okay, we're gonna make a change. Let's say it's urgent, right? Like right now, it's getting to be urgent, I think, for many people. How did it go about doing it? Because what we've been talking about, what we've been describing, is sort of like slow cultural change. It's about like immersion. How does it happen if we don't have much time to figure it out?
I think it's another good question. I think it's about a recognition, because we were talking earlier about kind of avoidance, and I think sometimes people go, well, we'll just hope it gets better and avoid it, and just maybe it'll all be all right in the end if we don't do anything. And I think it's having that courage to step up and go, this isn't okay, we need to change, right? How are we going to do it? So I think it's about having very explicit conversations And some of it's, I guess for the leader, some of it's going to be, some of it we can, even if it's urgent, we can still have conversations about it and, do something. But in the short term, some of it's going to be, I'm going to have to stand up and do this now. But I think a lot of it's about the courage to do that, because it's not always easy to take the difficult decisions or be the one going, look, this is coming. What do we do now? And everyone's like, oh no, it'll be fine. So not an easy one, but I think it's about not avoiding it, facing up to it, having conversations, learning from other people, don't reinvent the wheel. I think it's really about looking to, well, who's been there, done this before, where it's, often it's about, for example, having a mentor or, having other people that have been there before, that somebody else's organization might have gone through a similar crisis. How do I connect with them and draw on that? So that it's there when I need it. Sorry, there was something else. That's his menopause brain. I lose my track of thoughts. Sorry.
I understand. Then there's also the AI layer in the mix as well, right? That's having an impact on teams and people's mindsets. Are you seeing that? It's because what you were talking about. Sorry, I'll give you a break from the screen so you don't feel like you're sitting there always with the spotlight on you. So when you were talking about answering Joe's question, I was working with a bunch of leaders from IBM during the pandemic. And a lot of them were really struggling with like how to run teams and do all that sort of stuff. So I think right now we're back into that sort of a feeling with what's going on and the economic crises and everything that comes with it. But then you've also got the layer of AI on top. I've seen some videos of Meta's got like tracking employees' keyboard strokes to train AI so that they can take their jobs. The machinists have got these cameras that they wear over their head when they're making clothes so that AI can take their jobs, right? So the lack of trust towards leadership at this time would be so much higher because of all of these other aspects as well. So there's, it's the polycrisis, right? So there's the war and the impacts and energy and job loss from that. Then there's all of these crises and food and inflation and energy and, all costs are going up. And then you've got AI interruptions and it's going to take our jobs. We're going to talk about the AI sort of impacts later. There's a lot more going on right now for people than has ever happened there has been no time like this, and it's never been global. And I suppose just from your perspective, having done this for such a long time, what does that elevation look like for you as an observer and a participator?
I think it's almost like, well, where do we start when somebody comes and sees me? It's not like, well, I've got this discrete problem. It's like, well, I've got everything on my plate and people are feeling really overwhelmed by that. How do I, literally there's not enough hours in the day to do all the things and keep on top of what I should be doing with AI or how our, team or organization should be. There's a lot of, it feels like we've, never had so much information at our fingertips and yet never had so much stress, because it's how do we manage all that? How do we, find out what we should be doing? So I think what I'm seeing is people being just a lot more overwhelmed. It's almost like, well, where do we start? What is it you actually want to be different? Where's the sort of the change that's going to, be the positive domino effect on all the other changes? And sometimes it's about sort of saying, well, just because we could do everything doesn't mean we should do everything. So actually, taking it back to, well, what's most important here? And that's really hard when there's just so much going on. Some people, it's just about having the space to reflect on, well, no wonder you feel like this, because I think a lot of people struggle and go, well, they didn't see all the other 10 people or 20 people I've seen this week. Everybody feels like, well, I'm the only one having this struggle. And actually it's not, it's a function of, what we're all experiencing at, global level. So again, it's that, yes, there are things we can do personally, which will make things different, but also not blaming ourselves, because it's just that understanding and empathy of we're all living in a really, tough time. We're bombarded with everything from all direction, and how do we manage that? So I think it's, normalizing, well, no wonder you feel like this, but right, what can you do? Where do we start with you? What's going to make a difference? And some of it's shutting out the noise, because there's so much of it.
Yeah. So control what you can control, but then the problem becomes that people shut out the noise that they shut out all the noise and they're not paying attention, right, to things that actually do matter, or they go quiet when we need more voices, rather than being dominated by the voices that are currently dominating, who aren't sort of heading in the right direction. So it's a real quandary, right? But control what you can control, I think, is the first point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think if you imagine there's a model of sort of like 3 concentric circles. So one is that, circle of control, where what do we have direct control over, which is, what we say, what we do, what we eat, what we read, what we wear, how do we show up in our daily lives? And then there's sort of like a circle outside of that, like the circle of influence. So we might not be able to completely influence, whether I get a promotion or whether I get this job or whether I win my sports match, after work on Friday. But I can do everything I can to show up at my best for that, to make the outcome I want more likely. But then I guess what the bit that's expanded nowadays is the sort of the outer circle of the circle of concern, which is all the polycrisis and what's happening globally and climate change. And there's so much out there that is very distressing. And then we either go, oh my God, I'm so much overwhelmed, or avoid that. But I think it's telling, well, what from that can I actually do something about? So if I'm really concerned about the climate, what can I do locally that would actually have a positive impact on the climate? What can I do in terms of, recycling or doing beach cleaning, or, how can our organization be more sustainable in terms of our electricity use or our aircon or whatever? So I think it's trying to turn the overwhelming concerns that there are into what can I make a difference on from those, because and what can I not, and I might need to let go of and trust that somebody else will do. Because I think we all spend an awful lot of time worrying about all of this that we can't directly do something about, but how do we turn it into something we can, or let it go and focus on what we can control?
Yeah. And then in order to be able to do that, you need to create the space to reflect, right? And when everyone's running a million miles an hour and scared of the future and they're going to lose their jobs and AI, all that stuff, they're not stopping and going, hang on, I need to calm down and I need to spend some time in reflection. People aren't really sort of very good at doing that, right?
Yeah, well, especially when the more busy you are, the harder it is to stop. And yet the more you need to stop to focus on, well, what am I busy doing? And is this actually useful, or could I be changing my time? So I think a lot of, that's often a lot of time I work with leaders on, when do you curate that time to think? Because if you don't, it's often going to keep you awake at night. Lots of people have insomnia because they haven't given their brain any space or any downtime. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to think about it at nighttime. And, some of it's about, well, when do I create that time and how do I protect that time for thinking and see that as really, really valuable? And where do I do that? So I think, spending time in nature, for example, is a really wonderful, wonderful way of doing that. For example, we went on holiday to Taiwan a couple of weeks ago. We love outdoors and nature and spending time. And we were up in the mountains in Alishan, and there were these 1,000-year or 1 to 1,500-year-old cypress trees there. And you just sit there and you're like, oh my goodness, that just puts everything in perspective. They've seen civilizations come and go, and, we're just a sort of blip in the landscape. But it really sort of, I think for me, that's certainly one of the things I do, is just get that perspective and that calm and that space. Not that you need to do all that all the time, but how do we connect with places that support that kind of peace and thinking? And also, how do we create those daily moments, which might just be, I'm going to stop for 5 minutes. Or I did this course a couple of years ago on Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, which was run by Buddhist monks, about, what climate change starts with us and what we do internally. And one of the exercises that has stayed with me is like, every time you're at a traffic light, you can't change the fact you're a traffic light. So just breathe. I'm noticing my, breathing in, I'm noticing my in-breath, I'm breathing out, I'm noticing my out-breath. Because I'm busy, I pack a lot in as a working mum, and, sometimes like, well, that's now my space. That every time I stop at a traffic light, I do breathing exercises. So, it doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's just moments of pause, but it is also, how do I create time to be with myself and sit and think, or have conversations? I love thinking out loud. So one of the things that I do in terms of my work is have regular supervision and mentoring where I think out loud with somebody, and that space comes through talking. So I think we can all do it in different ways, but we need to stop and pause and think.
Yeah, I heard they've just proved if you do 2 to 3 minutes of meditation, it actually changes your brain. So there was a report out this week. Richard, you've been quiet. Do you want to?
I'm taking a lot in here. I'm really taking a lot in, but pretty much all you're saying, I can more or less relate to myself. For me, my own space is always walking in the morning into the office, unless it's torrential. Okay, fair enough. Then I'll use the tube or the bus or whatever. But the fact that you can come off the train and instead of saving 5 minutes and queuing up with people in the tube, I can actually walk alongside the river, cross the river, and that's my time. There are no mobile messages. There's no music in the earphones. I just lay out my day as I see it and gather my thoughts. And normally when I come into office, I always scribble something down that I've thought of in those moments, because that's really a good time for me when your brain is relatively clear. You've hopefully had some sleep. You're looking forward to having a full day. And okay, you're not exactly in nature, but at least you're outdoors, which I think helps greatly with those things. And I do think if you set off with a good start to the day, your day normally is easier and you make better decisions, and you're, for someone naturally very grumpy like me, you deal with it better.
All right.
I feel almost like we have to apologize to the audience, because I think we're arriving now at a nice, comfortable, peaceful, sort of sorted out state of affairs. And if you want to retain that state, I feel you have to turn off the show right now. This is where we have to thank Jane for coming in. Thank you very much for that, and all the strategies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now we have to move on to the rest of the show, which is going to be about the shit show.
And Jane's going to stay with us.
Time. Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Let me get this back up, and I'll just be moving us around. Okay. Just a couple of quick pieces that came out. It was obviously Earth Day this week. I'm a little bit over all these sort of celebrations, so I didn't honor it, on social media. And if you're wondering why, it's just because we haven't done anything about it, so why honor it? But there's a piece that I really recommend that did come out on Earth Day by Andrew Boyd, and it's Petromasculinity is Destroying the Planet. Can eco-masculinity help save it? So there's this perception that if you care about the planet, that it's a feminine energy, but if you don't, it's if you don't care about the planet, that's a masculine energy, which is a big part of the problem of why we haven't done anything about it. So I'll just give you a quick description. Petromasculinity describes pernicious fusion between fossil fuel use, climate change denial, and defense of authoritarian white patriarchal masculinity.
Ouch.
Yeah, and white environmentalism is coded, and green tech is coded as soft, weak, and feminine. So we need to sort of change that. So eco-masculinity is the term, and we need all the good guys to get on top, because at the end of the day, the concept is of the man as protector. The article sort of concludes, what's more important than the protecting the earth that sustains our lives, right? So, and I do think we need to get the men involved in this in a different way. And the current masculinity debate is very disturbing, and that references white masculinity, but I don't think it's just a white man thing. Although I think they're at the top of the tree at the moment, but I don't think that's where it is. Okay, so as far as the war in Iran goes, so finally we got a ceasefire without a date, and just that, right, without the threat of a date hanging over our head. Look, who wants to kick off what their perceptions of what's been going on? All right, Richard, you're laughing, so you can go.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the video we started with, right? And,
yeah, exactly.
Someone sent me a very thoughtful piece about what they think would be the game map going forward. And many times they repeated in this sort of research that actually a large part of what's going on is US playing for a US audience, because mostly they're negotiating with themselves. And I keep thinking Billy Idol, Dancing with Myself, right? and that's exactly what I think is going on.
Can I just express surprise? I never thought I would hear you refer to a Billy Idol song, but yeah,
it's in my head now.
Exactly, it's been in my head a lot here, right? And I think, and I keep going back to this every week, the Iranians are exactly in the place they want to be. They are here having almost seen this map roadmap way ahead. And now they find themselves in a position which is exactly where they wanted to be 2 months ago, where they can really leverage their position. Having been effectively one of 2 outcasts in the world with North Korea. They're now back in the spotlight, and they can extract a heavy price on the West for being there. So I don't think anything near term can actually come out as good from this, because I have no doubt that in Iran at the moment it's the hardliners that rule. There are no moderate elements on top of that political command chain, and that means they're not going to back off from more conflict.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt. There's a tweet that or blue sky. I don't know what a blue sky is called, but I put it in. It said the Iranian Navy, which has been destroyed 8 times, closed the Strait of Hormuz again because the United States, for the 7th time, won the war that wasn't a war. So the United States can open the Strait of Hormuz that was open before the not war. The not war that started to get the uranium that was completely obliterated so that the Iranians can't build a nuclear bomb that they weren't building for the not war that the United States started. And it goes on. But, the language, so because you're absolutely right. They are, the American politicians are playing for the MAGA audience. And then the rest of the world sort of sitting outside going, what? But there's been some other really interesting things. So first of all, Indonesian, I think it was the foreign minister or finance minister, dropped the idea of putting a toll on the Straits of Malacca, which has now been backtracked. There's a rumor about Donald Trump apparently going for the nuclear codes, and Kane, or whatever his person is in the military, there's a picture of him walking out of the White House with his head down, looking very concerned. That has not been proven, but we kind of know that it's a possibility. There was another one where Donald Trump had such a meltdown, such a massive temper tantrum, he was blocked out of the war room conversation. But you mentioned it in the intro, Joe, that the amount of munitions that have been used in this war have actually become a near-term risk. So basically, if the US decided that they wanted to go after China, they've expended at least 45% of its stockpile of precision strike missiles, at least half of its inventory of, is it THAAD missiles? And they're the ones designed to intercept the ballistic missiles, and nearly 50% of its stockpile of pilot air defense interceptor missiles. So, and these aren't something that you can just go and make more of. They take years and years and years. And even if you expand the manufacturing of these, it still takes years and years because they're such precision technology. So, it's kind of interesting. And the one thing I keep taking away from this is I think this war will see regime change, but not Iranian regime change.
Wow, that's bold. It could happen. It could happen.
I kind of, it should never have happened in the first place. There was always a reason for never going to war with Iran. Every US president before that knew, right? And here we are, and sitting out here in Asia, just really understanding, especially going through the pandemic in Thailand and seeing the suffering that was happening to the people in my community, the poorest always. And what's happening here, from an impact perspective, nobody, expert politician, nobody expected the impacts to land as quickly as they have landed. And we're only at the very, very beginning. And this is just Asia because it's closest. So, it's like, I mean, there's a guy called Craig Tyndale, and he wrote a post on, I'll put it in the chat, but it's War, El Niño, Pestilence and Famine, the coming shock to global food supplies. And I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at it. Did you have a chance, Richard?
Absolutely.
Can you give everyone a feel for how this all ties together?
Well, I'm very much a believer in exactly that most things that happen around the world, you can always follow the thread if you look hard enough and you're prepared to go searching, because everything is ultimately connected, because we occupy one physical space, which is our planet. So things will become connected. We have a conflux of really bad things potentially coming down here. We know climate change is happening, except for a few deniers. We can pretty much map out what that means in terms of loss of soil moisture, heavier, more volatile weather, floods, etc. On top of that, you have a cyclical phenomenon like Niño, which by all accounts looks like it's going to be a super Niño, which will turbocharge drought in some areas and floods and rainfall in others. And then you overlay that with something we brought on ourselves, which is the war situation and the constraints that that situation is imposing on all the things we have used to effectively circumvent and refuse to stay within our planetary limits. We have the use of nitrates to make synthetic fertilizer. We are clearly having a problem with getting the energy we need. And all these things tie in together and will result in one thing for sure, which is inevitable. There will be a big price shock coming, because that's how economics work. If things become scarce, those who can will pay for it. And those who haven't got the means will not have them. That generally is, people call me grumpy, but then you will see really how people get really grumpy when they can't have what they have been accustomed to having and been promised so by politicians who all of a sudden are no longer capable to deliver on those promises. So we will see our physical world break through economics before it breaks from environmental concerns. Governments will start negating on the promise to their population because they don't have the fiscal means to keep paying for things that people have become accustomed to. There will be physical scarcity in shops. If you can get them, you pay more, and those who can't pay will not have them. And ultimately, you keep pushing up against these boundaries, something breaks. And my guess is that the economy breaks way, way before the planet breaks.
Yeah. And then, of course, when the one thing that people don't sort of connect the dots on is the social unrest that comes off the back of that and the violence. And none of us are safe. And then more walls are built up, and this dystopian future that the tech overlords, which we're going to talk about in a bit later, the sort of, then that sort of comes into play, and that becomes even more justified if we just made the right decisions in the first place. But one of the things that I found really interesting about that list that Craig Tyndale put together was the Panama Canal, because of course the last time there was an El Niño, there was a drought that impacted the Panama Canal, which means another major shipping route potentially could be closed, because basically what happened was, because of the drought, the water was too low for the ships to go through, so that had an impact, and also because of the El Nino, the amount of what do you call those things? It was why. Sorry, I've just gone but basically the fertilizers and all that sort of stuff.
Yes,
the soil needs more of it because of the El Nino at a time when there's less available and it's more expensive. So. Sort of you kind of look at it, all of this, and you kind of think, and we're going to talk about El Nino in a bit, but so basically drought and floods both reduce fertilizer effectiveness. It's a double nutrient loss. It disrupts, the El Nino disrupts fisheries, so that's important. Acid shortages constrain critical mineral production needed for energy transition. So we're seeing a lot of that in Indonesia, where they're reducing output by like 10%. So it's a really big this list. I'll put it in. It's very long. In fact, I might put it in the weekend reads as the bullet summary that I extracted from it, because there's so much to it. But basically, the strategic outlook is the next 18 to 36 months will be defined by volatility and fragmented trade. So when we go back to what Jane was saying earlier, like knowing this is important so that you can prepare for it, but you can't sit in fear of it. You've just got to get yourself as prepared as you can. Food insecurity hotspots are likely in Africa and the Middle East. Critical minerals and energy transition timelines will be disrupted. So think about what critical minerals are used for. Policy responses will increasingly favour domestic resilience over global trade. Already started happening. China's stopped shipping its fertilizer. Turkey's announced. Russia's announced. Countries are going to, and we've seen that with rice exports. India keeping it at home. So the core risk is a synchronized shock where climate stress increases input needs while supply constraints reduced availability, creating a high probability global food system disruption. So that's a big
Cheerio.
thing. No, it is. But like I know that people don't want to face this stuff, but I face it so I can prepare.
Absolutely.
And I'm always in that keeping an eye ahead so that I can prepare at home and take care of my family. So that's why I think it's important. But Jane, have you got any thoughts you want to share? Can I put you back in the spotlight?
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask all of you guys who sit here. I'm obviously aware of quite a lot of this, and some of it I cope with by doing my bit of avoidance. But my answer is a question to you: what gives you guys hope through all of this? Because we can see it happening, we can prepare for it. But what came into my head was sort of the food hoarding in the pandemic and running out of toilet rolls and everybody panic buying. And it's very easy for, I think all of us are in a position of financial privilege that, we have money to absorb some of these shocks. But I'm, just really curious, well, what gives you hope, or what advice would you give to other people to prepare?
Do you mind if I jump in here? Is that all right, guys?
No. Go for it.
So there's two things, and I'm going to write them down so I don't forget them. First of all, no, I've already forgotten the second one, but so let me begin with the first thing. So I and Richard and I and David, who can't be with us today, have spoken about this before. I sit in a state of acceptance. So by sitting in this state, I've followed all of the threads to the end that I can possibly follow across all aspects of the polycrisis. I don't know everything about everything. That's not what I'm claiming. But if climate change gets worse, what does it mean? And what does it impact? So, it's not just about a changing climate. It's also the social economic impact. It's water wars, all that sort of stuff. So I followed every single thing to the end and gone, oh, that doesn't look like a lot of fun for anyone, including civilization collapse and human extinction. I followed it all the way, right? Mm-hmm. And then I went, okay, so this is the worst that could possibly happen. Now, so what this state of acceptance does is I've appreciated all of those paths, and now I sit in a place of, okay, that can be the path that we go on. But now that I know that that's the path, I'm going to do everything I can to fight to make sure that we don't go on it. So it gives me the action. It gives me the inspiration for action, not just for my family, but for the whole world, for all the world's children, but especially for the poorest, right? So acceptance is, to me, the number one thing. It doesn't mean I don't get lost in the emotions of the moment sometimes, but it's pretty rare for me to get knocked off my feet emotionally now, because I've already dealt through the emotions of it. So when I can sit in a place of acceptance, I can sit in a place of action. And when I'm in a place of action, then I can do something. And then the other thing, because I spend a lot of time with people who are the doomers, who just think it's all over. And I like doomers because they actually make sense and they speak honestly. What they don't have is any faith in the human spirit. And I have faith in the human spirit. So there's the two things for me: acceptance and faith in the human spirit. So it's acceptance and action and faith in the human spirit. What about you guys? Richard?
Yeah, I'm very similar. I'm definitely in an optimistic camp insofar as that when human ingenuity gets pushed really up against it, we are capable of extraordinary things. Yeah. The problem for us, and this is very much tying back to what Jane said earlier, we have the human fight or flight response. We're really great at dealing with that. Oh, I see a lion. I'm probably not going to take it on. I better start running here. When things hit us in slow motion, perhaps creating anxiety because we know it's there, we're not really good at dealing with that as our DNA makeup, because we need it to be up close, personal, and present. Then we can face it, because then it turns into fear. So my hope is that as all these things come together and we move beyond the state that it's kind of out there and people are aware of it and clearly anxious about it, perhaps through something as simple as food rationing. My parents' generation experienced food rationing. To me, it's a completely alien thing. You know, I grew up in Sweden, a land of plenty. Jesus Christ, it's like everything was on the shelves when you stepped in. That might be the kind of signal that actually forces us to start rethinking our choices.
Joe?
Because then it's up close and personal. And
Yeah. And you got plenty of tomatoes. And you
I have plenty of tomatoes, yes.
Joe?
I think for me it's an irrational sense of humor. I look at things and I figure a funny side to everything. But I also think it's because I've had so much happening in my life already. It's like the shit show has happened once or twice before. So I've got some calluses that could sort of help me to move ahead. And I have the same feeling. Maybe we don't share the exact same view of what humanity will be saved by, but I have a lot of faith in the in those who are on the scientific edge of trying to sort the problems out as well. So things as they are bad, but things as they are will not be what they will be. And hopefully there's a positive and an upside to it. I know of projects, and we've heard about them as well, where people are working on big projects that could literally save the environment, and they're almost scared to let it out because they don't want people to think that it's okay, so they can stop doing the rest of the things you need to do. So I know that something is coming, but I don't know when it will come. I think one of these days we will get to the point that we'll unlock nuclear fusion, and it'll create all kinds of other problems that come along with that. But if we sort our biggest problem, which I think is energy around the world, the rest of it can come and can be sorted out, I think, quite dramatically. But the journey to that point might be a little bit bumpy, shall we say? Yeah.
Yeah. I think your point about dark humor is very much welcome in our home and in my community. And sometimes I get in trouble for my dark humor, but it's completely like, I know that if Joe and I caught up, I could say anything and he wouldn't judge me or cancel me because he understands where it's coming from. And yeah, so Joe, with that energy comment, like, yeah, we can solve the energy crisis, but I think everyone's so energy focused that we're forgetting all the other bits, right? So I have this term called bullshit industries. There's a whole bunch of industries that just don't need to exist because they don't serve humanity. So if we replace the amount of energy we've got and continue what we're doing, we're still going to be trashing the planet, right? We might not be pumping stuff into the atmosphere, but we're still going to be pumping the microplastics and the chemicals into our water, into the earth, into our air. So, you know, it's like, I would say that we have to recognize the scale of the problem before we're going to deliver the scale of the solution, and we've never come anywhere close. So I always say, you know, we're tinkering around the edges. But yeah, so Jane, what do you think based on what we've just said as the psychologist?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I see that every day. I mean, you know, having heard the worst of what human beings can do to each other in my therapy room, every day, every conversation, I'm struck by human beings' resilience and, you know, what people can survive and come, you know, not just survive, but thrive through and come out the other side. So yeah, I'm a huge believer in the human spirit. And I think that, you know, sometimes it's like, things don't change until they get bad enough. Like, you know, lots of people are, well, I only changed once I got to rock bottom, and maybe that's where we're heading, that we needed a massive shake up in terms of how we're living and how we use the planet's resources. And if this might actually give us that, well, you know, we can't just think about this might be coming in slow motion. I can't remember who just said that. But yeah, maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call that we have to do things significantly differently, and we wouldn't have done it if this hadn't happened. So yeah, well, that's what keeps me going anyway, in terms of thinking, well, actually, like the Mandarin character for crisis is sort of like danger and like pivotal point or opportunity or something, that sometimes we have to have the crisis to change things for the better. So that's my hope, that this actually, catalyzes change in a positive way.
No, the Iranian videos, they might be Iranian propaganda, but I do think that they are addressing a fundamental truth. Like when you look at colonialism and from the sustainability perspective, right? For all of us living out here in the global south, just the strong arm techniques that are going on at the moment from the US towards countries in the region to do things and behave in ways and allow things. And it's not front and center, it's behind the scenes. A lot of that sort of stuff's going on. And I think this region has started to go, you know what, we're not putting up with that anymore. And I think that's part of the shift as well. And, it's like everyone was really comfortable with this world because it was all right. It was getting better for everyone kind of gradually, 500 million middle-class people in 2013 in Asia. Now there's over 3 billion just in Asia. Life's gotten better, right? So we'll just keep going. There's abuses going on, and there's this going on, and there's that going on. But now that's stopped. It stopped getting better for everyone. And I think that's a pivotal moment. And my concern is knowing what I know about the climate and the tipping points and where we are, and the fact that we've already lost the corals and everything else. It's so close, even though, we see the media saying, oh, we're really close to the Amazon tipping point. And I read in 2018 that a scientist said we've already passed the Amazon tipping point, right? So I'm sort of looking at all those different sort of aspects to it. And is it too late? But the reality is it doesn't matter if it's too late. We've got to keep trying. We've got to try with all our might. And sitting in the too late basket, I'm not interested in being there. My psyche would die if I sat in that space, right? So I need to be sitting at the front of, come on, we can do it. And people will then say, well, you're just naive. I'm like, I don't care if you think I'm naive, because I'm certainly not naive. Because I've said I get what they're saying, but we've got to try. I want to try. I want my kids to know that to the last breath in my body, I fought for their future, and that's all I'm asking other people to do, is fight for our kids' future. I'll stop in a minute, but when adults in particular, when they go, I just can't cope, I'm like, well, that's not fair, because if we don't cope, we're asking our kids to cope with something so much worse than what we've got to cope with, what we're being asked to cope with right now. It will be so much worse for them if we don't do everything we can. And so I feel it as a real obligation that I think all adults should be stepping into at this time to fight for the future for their kids. And we can do it. We can. There's more of us than the people who are leading us off a cliff. There are more of us. Anyone thoughts?
Yeah, I'll pick up your thread, because this is one of my absolute pet hates, right? That's why I often start the day being quite grumpy. I think, at least my wife claims that's the case. You turn on the news in the morning. If I'm not going into the office, we have breakfast together and we watch the morning news, BBC. And things are pretty tough in the UK for those who don't live here. Mm-hmm. And every time the BBC reporter interviews someone from the government, and they're saying, oh, people are struggling here, people are struggling there, and people are struggling everywhere. Why are you not doing more to help? i.e., why are you not writing checks so we can keep on living the way we're living, because there's hardship? Never once do that question get posed by saying, I think it's okay to steal my children's future by consuming now and lumber them with the debt that government will have to borrow to keep funding a clearly unsustainable transfer to the population so they stay happy. I find it completely immoral, unethical on any level to consume today's resources and run extraordinary budget deficits because you're incapable of telling the electorate the truth. You cannot have everything you want because we don't have the money to fund that. And if you pay more for your heating at home, you will have to put on an extra sweater or just heat one of the rooms. We cannot keep sending checks as energy support because energy prices have gone up, because we're going to ask our children and grandchildren to pay for that. But I never once hear that kind of reply, or from the people doing the interview. I find it extraordinary that they keep on posing the same question as if, why are you not doing this? I'm perplexed. And hence I start the day grumpy and need my walk.
But Richard, so can you help me understand that? Because from an inequality perspective, it's never been wider, right?
Yes.
So the people that the people who are really suffering,
yes,
who need help, and then there's the people who are not suffering, who are also taking from their children's future. So, what's that? Like, there needs then. I mean, inequality is an issue, not just obviously
Absolutely.
in the UK, but and I know you've talked about tax before, but I don't know what about that? The people that are at the bottom who like can't afford to heat their home and their kids are freezing.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily tough, but there will also be one element there having to tell those kids the truth, However, in terms of what politicians could simply do, and I think it was tried during COVID in one country, and I can't remember which one. I think it was an Asian country, but not a Southeast Asian one. Maybe it was Pakistan. I think I'm wrong, but I have it up there. You could easily introduce dynamic pricing for energy, depending on the size of the household. So say we are 2 people now because the kids have left home. We're living in a fairly big house. That's expensive to heat in the winter for 2 people. You calculate what the basic energy need is for one person to have your home at 16 degrees or whatever is still perfectly healthy, albeit cold, and this much for cooking some basic food. And I'm going to subsidize universally using taxes to have a very low pricing for that amount of units. And everything you use above that is basically priced at the marginal cost. All of a sudden, the base layer of energy will be very affordable for everyone, and then it's up to you to adjust your lifestyle. Because if you need more energy to heat a bigger place, you should probably pay for it.
Yeah.
It's not like this is, rocket science. It's a very, very simple measure to actually hurt the people that consume the most. Instead, during COVID, we wrote blank checks based on who used the most energy, got the most support. I mean, that's kind of hole in the head policy. You have this, and I have sympathy for them, right? It's also one of my pet hates. I'm really revving up here, Jane. This is normally what happens at this point in the show.
Now we have to do some meditation.
The energy prices goes through the roof. They interview small business owners. And this small business owner, this woman, she says, I had a perfectly great business and now I'm really struggling. I'm selling dried fruit. And obviously you use a lot of electricity to dry the fruit. And it's not my fault that this is kind of now unprofitable just because energy prices have gone up in Ukraine. And I'm thinking, of course, I have some sympathy for you, but this is a business risk like any other. You are really, really vulnerable to a higher energy price in your business. You cannot really expect the taxpayer to subsidize your enormous use of electricity so you can keep drying the fruit artificially and claim that you have a sustainable business that was perfectly fine. This is like a business risk like everything else. But when you are faced in a political situation when you're trying to help everyone equally, you're helping no one. That is the basic truth.
Yeah.
Because the money comes from somewhere.
The dried fruit. Dried fruit would potentially be an important source of calories if there's food shortages in the future, right? So
absolutely, we've dried fruit for millennia, right?
Yeah, and
but
meat.
What we normally do is we cut them up and we put them in the sun, and then some of the fruit goes brown because it's drying up slowly, and people don't like to eat brown apples. It's like, okay, then you don't eat them. But if we flash dry them, then they stay white and nice and very shiny in the package. I mean, come on. It's like, this is just economics 101.
Yeah. Hey, Richard, while you're grumpy, I wanted to put this one. I wanted to put this chart up. So world population with and without synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. We've also got Going South. He's joining us. And he said it's not too late to crash industrial civilization, though. Gaia and us together. So this is about half the world's population, basically. That's the difference.
Roughly. Roughly. Yeah. I mean, it's very clear that we have enabled a massive expansion in population thanks to our ability to farm the land more efficiently and grow more stuff in places that you couldn't grow things without the help of fertilizers. Now, it has some very, very dramatic side effects. It's not only that you take away the fertilizer and crop yields will stagnate. It's also the fact that we have for pretty much a century been involved in a lot of other really unsavory farming practices like monocropping and bigger fields to enable us to extract the grains more efficiently. And what bigger fields do is they're very conducive to sandstorms, because all of a sudden when it gets windy, the wind rips across and carries away a lot of the topsoil. Now, one of the scariest statistics that I ever came across many years ago is that it takes Mother Nature about 500 years to create 1 inch of topsoil. If you just leave the land fallow and let it grow. The US at the turn of last century, in some places in the Midwest where we know they grow a lot of crops, had something like 9-10 meters of topsoil. And you don't need to be a farmer or biology graduate to understand what happens if you take away the topsoil, but crop yields absolutely crash if you don't have nutritious soil. Some of these places in the Midwest in the US are now down to 2 meters because the rate of decline, and most of the US topsoil is lying at the bottom of the Atlantic. And it's the poster child because it was the first really heavily mechanized farming, and we had dust bowls already in the 1920s. So it's been going on for a long time. But when you deplete the topsoil with aggressive farming techniques, and then on top of that, you pour a lot of nitrogen in there to expand yields further, of course, you're going to get lakes that are full of algae because things grow exponentially in that kind of condition. But you're also depleting your topsoil because of these practices. And when the topsoil is gone, you're going to have a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and 60 years left of healthy soil.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I'm just sharing a few of the articles. So there's a piece in the New York Times. The Iran war sent shockwaves through Asia that are likely to spread. So I was talking earlier about they're amazed by the speed of impact, and obviously it's starting here, but it's going to go to the rest of the world. It's going to basically, no matter, even if it lasts just a few more weeks, it's going to be pushing more and more countries into convulsions of unrest, followed by recession. Governments are taking on enormous debt, so they're still recovering from their COVID debt, and now they're going to be faced with this debt. They're talking about millions across Asia could be pushed into poverty. Just from a magnitude perspective, this is really very, very, very large, and they used very 3 times. Most people probably won't know this. The rest of Asia, excluding China, is responsible for as much of the global economy as the United States or Europe. And it's amazing, all the different things that happen out in this part of the world. Air traffic has dropped considerably. They're expecting some of the low-cost carriers to go out of business. The UN's report predicted that war could cost Asia and the Pacific between 97 billion and 299 billion, equivalent to between 0.3 and 0.8% of regional GDP. So it's been big. So moving on to some of the extreme weather that we've seen, New Zealand got absolutely hammered by storms just this last week, Wellington and the area. And this report came out that a storm hit New Zealand every 8 days on average in the last year. And obviously this has an impact on insurance. So basically between March 25 and the end of February this year, there were 46 storms. And that means 33,000 storm-related claims. And basically these events have jumped from about 1 a month to 3 or 4 a month. Did you guys see some of the footage from New Zealand with this?
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was a mudslide basically on the images
Yeah.
I saw. I think they were from Wellington, but I could be wrong. I think it was Wellington.
No. I mean, the cars looked like they were in a war zone, right?
Yeah.
And
I didn't know
mudslides.
weather was so severe in New Zealand, actually, because it's, in the Lord of the Rings series, it looked glorious. But clearly they have some exposure to the elements because of where they are located in the world. And there is no doubt, and David and I often talked about this, as you well know, that the first link that's really going to break in the financial system and what we think will break the economy will be insurance, because that's the transmission mechanism by why people start feeling real pain.
Yeah.
For most people in the Western world, your house is the biggest possession you have in terms of your wealth. And the day you cannot get insurance on your house because the insurance companies will just back out. It's not like it's one of those insurances that are mandatory, like health insurance or car insurance when you're driving. You should pose the question to how much is a house that you cannot insure actually worth? And then you compare that to the size of the remaining mortgage stock, and you will pretty rapidly conclude that you have a big, big financial problem.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Joe, want to jump in? I'm going to put Joe on.
Want to
He hasn't spoken
apologize.
for a while.
I was just going to say, at this point, I'd like to apologize to Jane for bringing her on here. I think she was much more peaceful probably before she began the show.
Yeah, my blood pressure is going up.
But she's meditating away,
She said she was happy. All right, so let's continue with the meditation. El Niño, right? So this is a really interesting conversation. So in my weekend reads last week, one of the references said basically, even if it's just a normal El Niño, the impacts are going to be very, very extreme for food, for temperature rise. So the fact that they're talking about a Godzilla, not a super, which we've been talking about for quite a few weeks now, it seems more and more certain. It's in the 60 to 70% range now. So basically what happens is it shifts where storms and rainfall occur. So if you think of La Nina, what happens in La Nina? Now we're going to flip to El Nino, and they're going to be driving out of place extreme rather than simply more of the same. So that's kind of the sort of overview of it. But so flood risk is up in specific regions. So typically you see stormy and wetter conditions along the southern coasts of North and South America, which might be good considering some of the drought conditions we've seen there, but also the Horn of Africa. Now, because it's been in such a bad drought for such a long time, if the rain's too intense, of course, it's going to be catastrophic. And then China, and I think if you remember the last time El Nino came through, the floods that we saw in China were just crazy. And then drought, heat, fire risk is up pretty much everywhere else. So Australia, so the next summer for Australia, which obviously is something, the fire season sort of typically sort of kicks off October, November, but could be even earlier. Southeast Asia. And someone asked me recently, when was my pivotal moment of realizing that we're in trouble? And it was the first time I saw drought in Singapore. Singapore is green. It's always green. The first time it was brown. That was the moment for me. Central and Southern Africa, India, and the Amazon, all with high, elevated drought, heat wave, and wildfire risk. And they're talking 2-3 degrees above, like warming. That's where we're looking at. So it's not just 1.7 degrees Celsius warming, we could be 2.5 degrees warming for the first time in the next 12 months. So that's a pretty scary number if you think about it. Europe's a little bit sort of back and forth on El Nino. There's not one way that it is. So it could be hotter summers, colder winters, or it could be wet, mild winters, depending on all of the other climate patterns that are happening around the world. And it just sort of talks through Atlantic. Hurricane season tends to be lower, so that was the same as last year. So potentially good news for the US and the Caribbean nations. But yeah, we're El Nino is not looking good. So they think it'll be starting to really embed by about June, peak in December, but its impacts will last for a couple of years. So any thoughts on El Nino?
No, not outside, the normal pattern. I mean, you put the name Godzilla in there. I think people can imply what that means compared to a regular El Nino year, which in and of itself already brings a lot of food instability and really crazy weather. If it's of a higher magnitude and perhaps longer duration, everything's just going to go crazier. It might also spread even further outside the areas that are normally affected. Europe historically has not really had any weather effect from El Nino, but who's to say? I think you're kind of into this type of territory that you can't really model based on historical patterns because you've never been here. So you how can you infer what could possibly happen? I think it's very, very tricky, and I think scientists, I don't envy them, but I think they must be pretty busy, and so far they've done actually a reasonable job of explaining how this is going to happen for laymen like myself. Yeah.
So moving on to heat. So this is a big one. So we're not in El Nino yet, right? Those of us in Singapore, it's been pretty hot, hasn't it? So the real field temperatures are sort of 41, 42 most days, which is incredibly high for this part of the world. So if you look at your weather app, it'll say 31, 32 to 34, but the real feel is actually much higher. And when you think of countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Laos, Burma, oh God, you think of the poor buggers in Myanmar where basically electricity is just almost non-existent. You're right across the region, right? So Bangkok, just on the 18th of April, they reported that there's been 18 days of heat in the dangerous category. And obviously since then, it's continued, which feels like temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius. So tied into the war, energy shortages, all of that sort of stuff. India has just started issuing heatwave alerts across 7 states, and they're predicting a 3 to 5 degrees spike in temperatures from Punjab, Haryana, Delhi till the 24th of April. So it's becoming unlivable, and then you've got to think of that's going to impact rice crops. It obviously impacts the people working the fields. Women carrying babies in those sort of heat will be losing their babies. Animals, major loss of animals. In Australia, that they're talking about, cows and meat. Basically, our meat, they're all suffering. They produce less milk. They're not able to produce new calves, and so meat's going to become more expensive. So if you're not practicing a vegetarian or plant-based diet, the good reason to do it is to know how to do it before you have to do it, because you're going to have to do it. So that's the heat. All right, anything else? And of course AMOC, we're going to talk about it more next week. We've got Praveen Gupta joining us next week, who's an insurance guy, so we're going to talk about insurance. We're going to talk about AMOC, and he's calling in from Mumbai, so he's going to tell us about how hot it's been.
Ooh.
All right. So who wants to talk about the Rape Academy?
Oh.
This is the documentary you're referring to.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance? So okay. I shared an article from the New Feminist, and this is a perspective that is not widely shared. When it was shared, and my sons talked to me about it, the report was 62 million men are visiting the rape academy where they're learning how to drug and rape their wives. The 62 million figure is not representative of the amount of people. And this article in the New Feminist is basically saying there's about 1,000 men involved in this group that is being referenced. And when you understand that it's 1,000 men, it's a manageable problem versus 62 million, which is an overwhelming problem that we can't fix. And it also further degrades societal trust because you're sitting in church or you're sitting at work next to a man and you think, are you one of those men that's raping your wife and putting it up and selling it and, that sort of stuff, right? We have a problem, but I think I'll share this, but we have a problem, but the way that this information is being presented is not necessarily in our interests that it's being presented this way, because if we don't look the problems in the eye and look at them correctly, we turn them into. Me Too did this as well. We don't want men to shrink because of these sort of stories, because when they shrink, that's when we have these problems with teenage boys all hating women and becoming more misogynistic than boomers, right? So we need to keep the conversations open. We need to be sitting next to each other. We need to be looking each other in the eye and talking about these problems, because I think if we don't do that, the societal issues that we're dealing with will get worse. All right, Joe, I'm going to put you. No, actually, Jane, come on. You tell me. Did you see this?
I haven't actually seen this, but obviously work with a lot of people who've experienced this, and I have a 10-year-old son, and I'm very mindful of how do I bring him up, and how do we have conversations about consent, even if it's like, well, I'm tickling you and you say stop, we do immediately. It's just sort of how do we change this from the ground up? But it's some of it's very, very sad that there are you can see how they've got to that point, but how do we make sure it doesn't keep happening?
Raising boys here too, right? But then also raising daughters, right? There's a job that needs to be done to make sure that we're raising our daughters to deal with this world. Sorry, man.
And as a father of one of each, very unfairly, I was always infinitely more worried about her. It's like it's not rational. Statistically, boys are much more likely to get in all sorts of trouble when they're teenagers than girls. But somehow in the back of my mind, you're always thinking, he's a guy, he'll be okay. He can look out for himself. Girl, that's different, right? And I don't think it's particularly easy being young today and being bombarded with all these things. It was infinitely easier in the 70s when I grew up, and early 80s perhaps, as a later teenager. Life was really easy. And, some of the wordings being used in stories like this is just so alien to me, as a Gen Xer from that generation. It's like, I adore women. I thank God every day that I was born a man, so I'm allowed to adore women.
You can be a woman that adores women.
That too. I'm struggling to identify with the being woman part, but I can see it. And it's so far removed from anything I was being told by my father, and how do you want to be successful with women? It's really easy. You need to start by respecting them. If you don't do that, you're never going to be successful. Then there are other tricks. Easiest way is to make them feel comfortable in your presence by making them laugh, etc. I mean, the stories in this part is just so far removed from anything I can think of that it's completely alien to me.
But I mean, I want to get to the also the fact that sometimes some of these things get blown out, much bigger. I think as you mentioned a while ago, I tend to run to sites like Snopes to find out a little bit more about the truth behind the story, right? Because what happens is the social media traction exceeds the actual report. So there is this thing about how there is perhaps been 62 million visits by different people to different aspects of a particular website, but it does not represent, the attending of an academy, right? As in, like, they all haven't signed up for the course, right? For 1995, I'm sure. So it's. I'm actually thinking about this right now, as in, like, this is a bigger problem than it is for us to be discussing it. As in, it is upsetting that there is a sect of people who've actually bothered to go ahead and create some kind of content specifically for that purpose. But it's also at the same time, to me, not. I mean, it's me stepping back and saying I don't see it as big a problem in terms of the other problems that we're facing. It's certainly distasteful. We're not in agreement with it, but it certainly doesn't deserve the attention that I think it's getting.
I see. I disagree with that, Joe, and for its impact, right? Because so you're talking about what the reality of the numbers actually are, and I've shared the article from the New Feminist, and I want to encourage everyone to read it because it takes you through the process of how these sites exist and the numbers, but it's more about the process and also the laws that are in place where the companies that host these sites have no legal liability, so that's why they're getting away with it, and it's a Telegram story, and there's lots of information. But why I think this is a bigger issue isn't because of the actual issue that's being discussed, but the impact of what it is, what it has, right? So when I because I was asked to speak and host panels and stuff during the Me Too movement, right? And my first question was always to the guys, how are you responding to this? How are you behaving differently? And every single time they changed the way they behave with women in the workforce to in a way that made the women's lives worse to protect themselves, right? And I was like, well, that's not a good thing. Me Too was supposed to be sort of like a cleansing of the timeline, and then we all moved forward, and it didn't do that. It made men scared to be around women in a professional context and a social context, and I think it's all part of. And then you've got the social media aspect, and we've got COVID, where all these boys were locked away in their rooms. 95% of the sextortion in the UK is young boys, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think it's all interlinked. And we've got to sort of anything that I think that pushes men into a corner right now is dangerous. We need to be coming together into the center and saying there's always creeps, male and female, right?
Of course.
Now we need to. Then they're not going to go away, but the vast majority of us need to come together into the center and say, okay, enough, right? These social media companies, enough, right? They own the artificial intelligence companies. Come on. There's this underpinning of our entire society. And, the next point on here is the Nerd Reich, right? Palantir published its 22-point manifesto, and the response to that, Joe, I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at it, but the response to it's been fascinating. But this idea, Silicon Valley has a moral duty to support national defense. I thought you were global companies, like, what does that mean? And it's all of it, the whole Nerd Reich and the surveillance societies and what they're doing. And they're at the heart of all of this too.
Well, it poses a very important and difficult dilemma for them to actually present in a credible manner. You see, it's perfectly well to say that you are supportive and should be helping your home defense. It's a perfectly valid point, but then you cannot be a global company. Then you have defined your space. You're basically a defense contractor. You're Lockheed, but in a more narrow fashion, or Raytheon or whoever, and you're making weapons that are under extremely restricted export licensing because you're only going to sell them to your best friends. Then you can never ever come out and claim that you have any global ambitions. Those 2 points are not you're not capable of reconciling those 2 points in a credible manner.
Yeah. Joe?
I think that if you had basically got a a contract with the U.S. government, you've got a business that is bigger than a global business where you're competing with everybody else. So
Yeah.
I have a different, I feel that they've gone as big as they can go. I mean, Palantir serves the U.S. as well as I understand the Israeli forces.
Everywhere.
So,
Australia,
But
England, everywhere.
if you're
Yeah.
UK or you're Australia, would I be comfortable employing a player like that to look into my security questions? Absolutely not, because you know who their ultimate master really are. So in a world where US is talking actively about retreating from NATO, I would immediately block a player like that from ever being involved. If I had the political power in any of these countries, like the UK or Australia. For me, it's a really basic and simple thing to deal with. They are serving a completely different master.
Yeah. But they're not serving democracy because they're private companies that are based on profit, right? So
yes,
who's in control? And it's funny. What's his name? One of the geopolitical commentators. I'll remember it after the show. For the first time, I heard him say that he sees the technology leaders, the current ones, as one of the greatest threats to global society and democracy. Ian Bremmer. Which I was surprised. So we first started talking about the tech bros and the Nerd Reich after the last US election, and I think the risk of them is now being understood. All right, looking at the time, we're not going to get through everything. We had a piece on AI and how there's a massive backlash happening in the US, and it's starting to be seen. We're starting to see some stuff in Asia, but when you look at the debt that's being accumulated because of the crisis, a lot more countries in the developing world will invest in AI technology with data centers because they need the money, because they're accumulating debt, which is not necessarily going to be good for their society, especially if there's not enough water and the emissions that come from it, and also the fact that the forever chemicals that get pumped out as waste as well. So, yeah, there you go. And Joe, you'll be pleased to know 2/3 of, I'm going to put us back together, 2/3 of people surveyed around the world believe unproven claims about vaccines, raw milk, and more. 2/3.
Yeah, it's staggering.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to find out how things really work. And to take the time. So it's in terms of a shortcut, it's actually much easier to just go and look to your left, look to your right, and go like, my group of people seem to think this is the right thing. I had I did a number of events these past 2 weeks, and without mentioning exactly who it was, I was speaking to someone who was really quite high level, who I think bought in and maintained the idea of where the COVID-19 virus came from in terms of the development, and they cited a particular aspect of the genetic evolution of it as proof that it actually was developed in a lab. And actually, in truth, the science actually is completely the opposite. As in, like that rapid evolution is actually evidence that it moved in the wild, because it's in the wild where you get that genetic, that you get that wild genetic changes that happen, right? So that evolution, that rapid evolution, which was cited as a reason why it's proof that it was in a lab, it was completely false, right? But this was someone who would be of some influence, and they would have, and if they said it to somebody else, they would then be automatically kind of like put into the team, like in terms of the ledger for score one for the team, right? So the process of trying to figure out what the real science is, and also to accept that science is evolving, as in like you can be right today and literally be then found out to be wrong along the way, and that should be okay if you're a scientist. It's something that the general public hasn't come to terms with. So they will hold, and unfortunately scientists are not very good at coming out and saying that as well. They go like, okay, we were wrong before, but this is the latest news. We were wrong before, this is the latest news, because we're also sensitive to the whole thing about being wrong in the first place, right? So it's a tough one. I'm not surprised. It's also because it's, like when you talk about an idea that spreads, and this is what memes are about, is that if you create something that is sticky and easy to understand and easy to spread, and it kind of makes sense, has enough for it to make sense, it will spread. It will go to the next person because it's the easier thing for me to remember and tell you. And then if I'm then asked to defend it, if what you've told me about it makes enough sense, it gives me enough to defend it as well.
No, it's interesting. I can understand so much when I have conversations with people about their beliefs based on how they speak about vitamins, geoengineering. There's so many conversations I'll be having, and someone will just drop a little sentence in, and it's a belief in an idea that has been debunked many, many times over by science, but has stayed in the sort of the conversation, right? And it always makes me stop and look at them and go, okay, all right. So it helps me understand who I'm speaking to, and I'm always very gentle in rebuffing it because you have to be. So on Monday, I'm going to get another my COVID booster because I have kept an eye on this conversation the entire time since COVID first started, but there'll be anti-vaxxers out there attacking me for it. And I'm like, I don't give a shit what you think. I really don't.
No, we're all entitled to move around without a bulletproof vest, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, right. But if you've kept track of the COVID conversation and what the research is showing and what's being pushed down, which is amazing at the moment, especially out of the US and the CDC, I have no doubt that I am correct in my decisions to continue with an annual booster around COVID. I have no doubt. And I'd be happy to read information that says to me, you're wrong. I would be happy to. But I find a lot of people, they're not even willing to have the opposite conversation, So, yeah, it's an interesting time. So let's wrap up because, Jane, you've been an absolute legend joining us. I hope you enjoyed being here and it wasn't too depressing.
It's been a pleasure. No, well, I think it's that, information is power, isn't it? You can't do anything until you, understanding. So it's been, being a guest on or being invited to be a guest on here has made me watch some of the previous episodes and it's, I found it so useful. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice. Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. It's fantastic having you.
Doing what you do and not shying away from the different conversations and giving people food for thought that we can all go away and learn more and figure out what we need to do.
Yeah, take care of yourselves first, right? Just like the whole airline put the oxygen on. What is keeping you distracted? Who wants to go first?
Let's start with Jane.
My go-to distraction is reading books that are very sort of like murder mystery, where everything all works out all right. That's my current thing. When life gets too hard, get something that's predictable and nice and feel good. So that's my current thing at the moment.
Oh yeah. I like watching chick flicks when the house is empty of men for the same reason. Richard?
Well, I have two things keeping me busy. As you well know, there is this whole new planting experiment going on, and this year's new crop, and I have to say, it's not looking great at the moment, are asparaguses.
Yeah.
Much like women, I adore asparaguses. They're phenomenal, right?
What's the plural for asparagus? Is it asparagi or asparaguses?
I don't know.
Neither do I.
Very good question there.
We'll find
call them
out.
asparaguses, but it could be asparagus.
I think the plural is just stalks of asparagus.
Yes.
I just think of stinky way.
Yeah. But they're incredibly tough to grow. And then you need to grow them for 3 years before you can harvest first time. So we'll see how this turns out and I'll keep you posted. The other thing that I'm currently doing is basically clearing out some stuff. Clothes, stuff in the broader context might be the odd book, but also
going
mostly somewhere? No, you see, this is a long discussion, but you're coming to the point in life when there might be a resizing happening at some point, and I don't want to be stuck looking at dealing with all that if we ever move out of here.
Yeah.
So clearly the kids are never going to come back other than for holidays. So it's very poor justification for keeping a place this size, really, when there's only the two of you. So some of the stuff will, be given to various people who want them or charities. It's asparagus.
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, we are. Forget asparagus.
Yeah.
I have lots of polyethylene bags, closed over soil in various containers. And I'm hoping they will start coming through in the next 10 days or so. That's what should happen if I've been successful. If not, I'm never going through this again. There are so much easier things to grow than asparagus.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Until you grow it, you don't know it. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Joe, I can't grow coriander. Oh, it's killing me.
First of all, I don't grow anything except nails.
Nice.
I have and hair as well. So Chicago PD is a series I've been watching, and I've been quite amazed at the topics coming up and how current they seem to be. And then I realized that the show actually began in 2014. So I'm watching a show that is currently more than 12 years old.
Wow.
And things in some ways haven't changed. So it's a remarkable thing for me. I've grown a new respect for Dick Wolf, the producer of the series, and many other series as well, because I've it's kind of like the cliche joke about all the crime series that he's got. I mean, it's Special Victims Unit and all that kind of stuff, and all that is Dick Wolf, right? But the man has a knack for telling those kinds of stories or producing those kinds of stories. So Chicago PD is what is keeping me busy right now. I am watching the entire backlog, and what I was amazed by was watching an episode that was produced for the 2020, which was about a disease and an outbreak that happened in Chicago, and it happened obviously. It was produced and made before anything really happened, but they got quite a lot of those aspects correct as well. So, yeah, if you want to watch a show that is gritty, it has characters that are all kinds of wrong as heroes and anti-heroes. Chicago PD, that's quite a nice show.
Nice. Jane, what's your daughter's name?
Alexandra.
Alexandra, I want to say hello. I'm very impressed that you.
Sorry, Lexi. Her actual name is Alexandra, but she is Lexi, and I always struggle.
Lexi.
Right now, so it's Lexi.
All right, my son is Lex, so there you go. But I'm very impressed that you listen to podcasts. My boys are 18 and 19. I can't get them to listen to podcasts. They do listen to a lot of heavy metal, though. So, but congratulations on investing in the field, because I think there's a lot to learn. But the thing I watched in the last week, which I watched with Lex, and I didn't have any expectations of it, was Hamnet. Have any of you watched that movie yet?
No.
It's on the list. It's on the list.
Yeah. I absolutely loved it, because it's about the forest woman. It's the woman who emerges from the forest, and she's sort of like which has been sort of demonized and made a negative historically, right? But the actual, the herbal women, the women that could make these poultices to heal things. So that's who she is. And then there's the Protestant sort of like judgment towards her and her behaviors and stuff. So I actually just found it a really powerful historical reflection on how, because I often ask the question, how do we move from this to this historically, And I remember asking a friend in India, how did you move from the Kama Sutra to sexual repression? And he goes, just a couple of generations and colonialism is all it took. And I was like, but that fast? And he's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how it works. So Hamnet to me was that story, and the wife of what's his name?
William Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. Yeah, she was. It's a really it really did touch me. And another show I started watching is The Rookie. which is a few years old now. But
Yep.
one of those filter through your brain and not have to think about it. But that's a pretty gritty show. You know, LA streets aren't a nice place for a lot of people. So yeah, that's what's keeping me distracted. So there you go.
There you go.
15 minutes over. Richard's in a rush. Jane, thank you. Joe, thank you. And we'll see you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone who's been commenting going south. Good to see you again, Dales. Early for you. He does a 6 a.m. for me, and it's just not possible. But thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Don't forget, by the way, to put in your nominations for us for the sweet and short podcasts of 2026.
Yeah. And the best name.
Yeah.